The screech of metal colliding with metal ripped through the calm morning air like a thunderclap, and for a split second, I thought I was imagining it. I had just moved into this neighborhood, carrying boxes from the back of my truck, when the sickening crunch of my car being smashed reached my ears. I dropped the box I was holding, my heart pounding, and turned toward the driveway. My stomach twisted at the sight. My brand new car, barely a month old, sat crumpled at the front with the hood bent inward. A black SUV had rammed it full force, its front bumper still pressed against my vehicle. My first thought was shock, followed quickly by rage. Before I could even move, the SUV door swung open, and out stepped a man in what looked like a police uniform. At first glance, he might have fooled anyone. He had a dark shirt with patches, shiny boots, a badge clipped to his chest, even a radio on his belt. But something about him didn't sit right. His badge gleamed too much, like cheap plastic. His shirt had wrinkles, the patches looked crooked, and the holster on his hip was empty, no weapon, just an imitation. He slammed the door shut and strode toward me, puffing his chest out like he was about to give me an official citation. This car, he barked loudly, pointing at my mangled hood, was illegally parked. HOA rules say vehicles can't block the sidewalk or hang past the curb. I had every right to move it, or smash it if necessary. My jaw dropped. Was this guy serious? My car wasn't blocking anything. It was parked neatly in my own driveway, well inside the property line. I wiped my hands on my jeans, trying to stay calm, and asked, "Who exactly are you supposed to be?" He smirked, tilting his head like he was above me. "I'm the HOA enforcer. The cop they bring in when people like you think the rules don't matter." That's when my blood started boiling. The HOA? I had heard rumors about this neighborhood's overbearing association, but I never expected them to send someone dressed like a police officer to my doorstep. And to smash my car? That crossed the line from ridiculous into criminal. My wife came rushing out with a worried look, her eyes going wide when she saw the damage. She covered her mouth with her hand, whispering, "Oh my God, what happened?" The man turned to her and sneered. "Your husband parked illegally. Consider this a lesson. Next time, it'll cost more than just a dent." Neighbors started peeking from behind curtains and slowly stepping onto their porches. Phones appeared in their hands, recording. I could hear their murmurs. "Is that a cop? Wait, the HOA has police now? No, that doesn't look real." One older man muttered, "That's not regulation. I was military, I know a fake when I see one." I stepped closer, squaring up with the guy. "Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but you're not a cop. And you sure as hell don't have the right to touch my car." He pulled a fake baton from his belt and tapped it against the hood, leaving another small mark as if to prove his point. "You're new here," he said with a smug grin. "So I'll give you this one warning. Follow the HOA rules, or I'll be back. And next time, it won't be just your car." My wife grabbed my arm, her voice trembling with anger. "You can't do this. This is harassment." But the fake cop only smirked, his sunglasses hiding his eyes as he leaned in close to me. "You think calling the police will help? By the time they get here, I'll be gone, and you'll be stuck with the bill." His arrogance burned hotter than the midday sun. He wanted us to believe he had power, to scare us into silence. But what he didn't realize was that his performance had cracks all over it. His badge said, "Special Enforcement," with no department listed. His shirt patches didn't match any law enforcement agency I'd ever seen. And worst of all, he called himself the HOA's cop, which isn't even legal. I could feel my neighbor's eyes on me, waiting to see what I'd do. My fists tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. "You just made a big mistake," I told him, my voice steady, though my chest was heaving with fury. He laughed, a mocking, hollow sound. "No, rookie. The only mistake here is thinking you can ignore the HOA. You'll learn fast, every car, every yard, every noise. I decide what's allowed. He turned, waving his hand like he was dismissing me, then strutted back toward his SUV as if he had accomplished something. My car, my pride and joy, stood ruined in the driveway. My wife shook her head in disbelief, her voice low but sharp. We can't let him get away with this. Neighbors gathered closer now, whispering, recording, some even shaking their heads in disgust. One woman muttered, I've lived here for 10 years, and I've never seen anything this crazy. Another man said, if the HOA is behind this, they're in trouble. I clenched my jaw, pulling my phone from my pocket. The fake cop noticed and barked, don't even think about calling anyone. You deal with me directly, or things will get worse. He tried to sound threatening, but in that moment, I knew he was bluffing. I stared him down, thumb hovering over my screen. He had smashed my car, threatened my family, and embarrassed himself in front of half the neighborhood. He thought he held all the power. But little did he know, the moment I made that call, everything would change, and he would regret ever stepping foot in my driveway. The man's voice echoed in my ears long after he barked his fake warning. I stood there, my fists clenched, every nerve in my body screaming at me to shut him down right then and there. My wife tugged at my arm, whispering, don't do anything rash, let's think this through, but my eyes never left him. He stood with his chest puffed out, baton in hand, his cheap uniform hanging awkwardly on his frame, trying so hard to look official that it almost became laughable. The neighbors, still filming from their porches and driveways, leaned in closer, and I could feel the whole street holding its breath. I finally broke the silence and asked, you keep saying you're an HOA cop. What department do you work for? What's your badge number? His smirk wavered for a fraction of a second, but then he snapped back with, I don't answer to you. I answer to the HOA board. They brought me in because of troublemakers like you. He jabbed his baton toward my car, the metal clanging against the dented hood. You think you can just move in and park wherever you want? Not in this neighborhood. Not on my watch. I glanced around at the neighbors. Some were shaking their heads, others whispering things like, I never voted for this, and this guy's not real. It was clear that more and more people were starting to doubt him, and he knew it. He shifted his weight nervously, gripping the baton tighter. My wife crossed her arms and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. You're not a real cop. Everyone here can see it. Your badge is fake, your uniform is fake, and you don't have the right to threaten anyone. He spun toward her, his face twisting in anger. Lady, you'd better watch your tone. I don't care who you think you are, you're in my jurisdiction now. One call from me and your whole family will be fined, blacklisted, maybe even evicted. That was the moment I knew this guy wasn't just pretending, he actually believed he had power. I took a step forward, narrowing the distance between us until we were almost face to face. You can scare other people all you want, but you picked the wrong driveway today, I told him, my voice low and controlled. His eyes flickered, just for a moment, as if he realized I wasn't backing down. But then, desperate to maintain control, he raised his baton higher and shouted, back off or I'll make sure you regret it. A ripple of gasps spread through the crowd. Neighbors were now openly calling him out. You can't threaten people like that, one man yelled. This is illegal, a woman shouted. Phones moved closer, catching every angle, every word. I knew the more he ranted, the deeper the hole he was digging for himself. My wife leaned close and whispered, text the sheriff now. Don't let him know. I nodded subtly, pulling my phone from my pocket, pretending to scroll while my thumb typed a quick message. I told the sheriff everything in one line, fake cop smashed my car, impersonating law enforcement, threatening us, come fast. I hit send, slipped the phone back, and locked eyes with the fraud again. He must have sensed something, because his tone grew louder and angrier. Listen to me. I run this neighborhood. The HOA gave me full authority. I can write tickets, I can enforce punishments, and I can deal with people however I see fit. A laugh broke out from one of the neighbors. Tickets? What tickets? I've never seen one of your so-called citations. The man's face flushed red. That's because everyone else follows the rules. Another voice chimed in. No, it's because you're fake. We all thought you were sketchy, and now you've shown your true colors. The fraud's grip on his authority was slipping, and he knew it. His eyes darted back and forth between the growing crowd, his sunglasses failing to hide the panic building in them. He tried to salvage the situation by pacing in front of my car and barking, "This is still a violation, and I will be reporting it to the HOA. You're all witnesses." But the neighbors weren't buying it anymore. One woman shouted, "We're witnesses to you smashing his car, not to him breaking rules." Another added, "And we have it all on video." That's when he snapped. He raised the baton high and slammed it down on the hood again, denting it further with a sickening thud. My wife screamed, and I felt my blood pressure spike so high I thought my vision might blur. The crowd erupted in outrage, voices overlapping, "That's assault. He's destroying property. Call the police now." I stepped forward, my voice shaking with controlled fury. "That's enough. You're done here. You're not touching my car again." He sneered at me, trying to hold on to whatever little intimidation he had left. "You think the cops will save you? By the time they show up, I'll be gone, and you'll have nothing but a wrecked car and a bill you can't fight." What he didn't know was that the cops were already on their way. I decided to keep him talking, to buy more time. "So tell me," I said, crossing my arms, "how much does the HOA pay you to impersonate a cop? Do they give you a fake paycheck too, or just the fake badge?" The crowd laughed openly this time, and his face turned crimson. "I'm not impersonating anyone," he shouted. "I'm the authority here." He turned to the neighbors as if begging for support. "You all know me. You know I keep this place safe." But instead of agreement, all he got were glares, laughter, and phones recording his every move. "Safe?" someone scoffed. "You just smashed a car." "Safe?" another yelled. "You grabbed him and threatened his wife." The fraud's breathing grew heavier, his fake uniform damp with sweat. He looked around wildly, realizing his hold over the neighborhood was crumbling. He tried one last desperate move, pointing his baton at me. "If you don't drop this now, you'll regret it. The HOA board will back me up, and you'll be the ones out of luck." I shook my head, my voice steady as I replied, "No, the only one who's going to regret this is you." At that exact moment, the distant wail of sirens cut through the tension. Everyone's heads turned. My wife's grip tightened on my arm, and the crowd buzzed with excitement. The fake cop's confidence finally cracked completely. His smirk vanished, his hands trembled, and for the first time since he stepped out of that SUV, he looked terrified. He muttered under his breath, "No, not now," and took a step back, clearly debating whether to run. But it was too late. His moment of fake power was over, and the real reckoning was only seconds away. The faint sound of sirens grew louder with every passing second, bouncing off the walls of the quiet suburban street like a warning bell announcing justice was on its way. The fake cop's face drained of color as the neighbors began murmuring louder, some even laughing at the irony of the situation. He had strutted around like a king moments ago, smashing my car and barking threats, but now the cracks in his fake armor were visible to everyone. He tried to recover his bravado, tugging at his cheap uniform shirt and puffing out his chest again, but his hands betrayed him, they were shaking. He muttered under his breath, "This can't be happening now. They weren't supposed to come this fast." He glanced at his SUV like he was preparing to bolt, but the circle of neighbors had grown tighter. People moved closer, filming from every angle, making it clear that if he ran, he'd look even guiltier. My wife crossed her arms, her face set in stone as she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Don't even think about running. You wanted to act like a cop? Then stand right here and face the real ones." The crowd erupted in agreement, voices overlapping with phrases like, "That's right," and "Stand your ground." The fraud sneered and tried to snap back, "I don't answer to you, lady," but his voice cracked halfway through, betraying his nerves. Then, almost like destiny, the sheriff's cruiser rounded the corner, lights flashing red and blue, sirens wailing before abruptly cutting off as it pulled up behind the fake cop's SUV. The fraud stiffened like a deer caught in headlights. Sheriff Daniels stepped out, his boots heavy against the pavement, his hand resting casually near his holster as he scanned the scene. The man was everything the fake cop wasn't: commanding, confident, and undeniably real. His eyes swept over the smashed car, the nervous fraud in the phony uniform, and the cluster of neighbors with their phones raised. Daniels let out a long breath and asked in a voice so calm it was chilling, "What in the world is going on here?" The fake cop scrambled for words, his false authority crumbling faster than sand in the tide. He raised his hand in an awkward salute and blurted, "Officer reporting for HOA enforcement, sir. Just dealing with a parking violation." The sheriff tilted his head, raising an eyebrow like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He stepped closer, squinting at the badge pinned to the man's chest. After a second, he let out a dry laugh, though his eyes stayed sharp. "Son, that badge is plastic. I've seen toys from the dollar store that look more convincing." The neighbors erupted in laughter, some clapping, some shouting, "We told you so." The fraud's face turned beet red, sweat trickling down his forehead. He stammered, No, you don't understand. The HOA hired me. They told me I had full authority here. I was just doing my job." Daniels took another step closer, his tone hardening. "So you're telling me the HOA gave you the right to impersonate an officer of the law? To smash someone's property? To threaten people in their own driveway?" The fake cop's words stumbled over each other like a broken record. I wasn't impersonating. I was just enforcing the rules." Daniels reached out, snatched the fake badge off his shirt, and held it up for the neighbors to see. "This isn't law enforcement. This is fraud. And fraud combined with property damage, threats, and impersonation? That's a fast track to handcuffs." The crowd cheered as if they were at a sporting event. Phones captured every detail, the sheriff exposing the man's lies, the fraud's panicked expression, the moment his fake authority completely disintegrated. My wife's voice cut through the noise, calm but razor sharp. "Sheriff, he smashed our car and threatened to do worse if we didn't obey." We all heard it. Neighbors nodded, several shouting, "We saw it too, and we've got video proof." Daniels turned back to the fraud, who was now visibly trembling. "Anything you'd like to say before I make this official?" The fake cop glanced around wildly, searching for an ally, but every set of eyes on him was cold, angry, or mocking. Even the ones who had once cowered under the HOA's strict rules looked liberated, like a weight had been lifted now that someone stood up to this madness. Desperation took over. He tried one last gamble, pointing his baton at me like a cornered animal. He provoked me. He parked wrong, he was rude, he made me do it. Daniels didn't even flinch. He plucked the baton from the man's hand like taking a toy from a child and tossed it to the ground. "Enough. You're done." In one swift motion, the sheriff twisted the man's arms behind his back and snapped on a pair of handcuffs. The sound of metal clicking shut was met with a wave of cheers from the neighbors. Phones zoomed in, capturing the moment the so-called enforcer was reduced to nothing more than a criminal in cuffs. The fraud sputtered protests as Daniels marched him toward the cruiser. "You don't get it. I was helping. The HOA needs me. You're making a mistake." Daniels shoved him gently but firmly into the back seat of the cruiser, slamming the door with finality. Then he turned back to the crowd, his face softening as he addressed us. "Ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you, this man is not, and never was, a cop. What he did today is a crime, and he'll be facing charges for impersonating an officer, destruction of property, and harassment." The neighbors clapped and cheered again, relief washing over them. For years, they had been under the thumb of Karen and her overzealous HOA board, but this moment felt like a turning point. Daniels walked over to me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry about your car. Insurance will handle the damages, and will be adding restitution to his charges. You did the right thing by holding your ground and calling us." My wife exhaled deeply, her hand squeezing mine as if to say, "Finally." But even in that moment of victory, I caught sight of Karen herself, the HOA president, peeking through her curtains down the street. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with panic. She slammed the curtain shut the second she realized I'd noticed her. That told me everything I needed to know. She had been behind this all along, and though her fake cop enforcer was in cuffs, I had a sinking feeling this battle with the HOA was far from over. Still, as the sheriff drove off with the fraud in the back seat, neighbors smiling and congratulating us, I felt a surge of pride. He thought he could smash my car and scare us into silence. He thought he had power because he wore a fake uniform. But in the end, the truth came out, and now he was the one facing consequences. The flashing red and blue lights faded into the distance as Sheriff Daniels' cruiser carried the fake cop away, but the energy in the neighborhood didn't settle down. In fact, it felt like the entire block had come alive for the first time in years. People who had once kept their heads down and avoided speaking up against the HOA now stood tall, talking animatedly with each other about what had just happened. It was as if a spell had been broken, a long reign of fear cracked open by one dramatic moment. My wife and I stood by the dented hood of our car, surrounded by supportive voices. Neighbors who had barely spoken to us since we moved in were suddenly shaking my hand, patting me on the back, even offering to bring food and help with the car repairs. One older man leaned on his cane and said with a chuckle, "Son, I've lived here 20 years and I've never seen someone stand up to them like that. You've given us all hope." His wife nodded fiercely beside him. "That woman, Karen, has been running this neighborhood like a dictator. That fake cop was just the latest scare tactic. But you? You showed us we don't have to take it anymore." Their words filled me with pride but also lit a fire inside me. I realized this was bigger than just my smashed car. The HOA had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. If Karen thought she could hide behind her curtains and act like nothing had happened, she was in for a surprise. As the crowd began to disperse, my wife turned to me, her eyes serious but with a spark of determination. "You saw her, didn't you? Watching from her window. She set this whole thing up." I nodded. "Oh, I saw. And so did half the street. She can't deny it anymore. The sheriff might have taken her goon, but she's the head of the snake. We need to deal with her next." That night, after the adrenaline had cooled a little, we sat at the kitchen table with our laptops and phones, scrolling through the dozens of videos and photos neighbors had shared. Every angle of the fake cop's tantrum, every second of him smashing my car, every frame of Sheriff Daniels calling him out was captured in crystal clarity. My wife uploaded everything to a shared drive, making sure nothing could mysteriously disappear. She was meticulous, labeling each file with timestamps and witness names. "If Karen tries to bury this," she said, "we'll bury her case in evidence." I couldn't help but laugh. "You're scarier than Ghost Viper sometimes, you know that?" She smirked. "Don't forget who kept her cool while you nearly decked that guy." The next morning, the HOA board announced an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. It was obviously damage control. Karen probably thought she could spin the story, maybe convince people the fake cop was a contracted security officer, who just went a little too far. But this time, she wasn't the only one with a voice. By the time we arrived, the room was packed wall to wall with neighbors, many of them buzzing with anger. Phones were out, cameras were rolling. Karen stood at the front, clutching her usual binder of rules like it was a shield. Her face was tense, but she still tried her trademark smug smile. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her tone syrupy but shaky. "I know there's been some unfortunate confusion regarding yesterday's events. Rest assured, the HOA board is handling it internally. There's no need for panic or for outsiders interfering in our community's governance." A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. People weren't buying it. One neighbor stood up, a younger guy with a video still paused on his phone. "Confusion? Lady, he smashed a man's car with a baton. He was dressed like a cop. He threatened people. And you think this is just confusion?" Another voice rang out, "Yeah. We all know you hired him, Karen. Who else would back up a fake cop?" Karen's face tightened, her lips pressed into a thin line. She tried to retort, "I don't know what you're implying," but she was cut off when my wife stepped forward, her voice calm but strong. "No implications. Just facts." She held up her tablet, where Sheriff Daniels' official statement was displayed. The sheriff confirmed the man was impersonating an officer. He confirmed the HOA had no authority to deputize anyone. And half the neighborhood has video proof of him saying he was hired for HOA enforcement. Gasps filled the room. Karen opened her mouth but no words came out. For the first time, she looked cornered. I took a step beside my wife, my voice steady. "Karen, your enforcer is in jail. Your lies are on video. You've run this place with fear and threats long enough. It ends now." The room erupted in cheers and applause. People who had once sat quietly at these meetings now stood, demanding accountability. "We want a vote to remove her," someone shouted. "Yeah, no more HOA dictatorship," another yelled. The pressure was overwhelming. Karen's carefully constructed empire was crumbling right in front of her eyes, and she knew it. She tried one last desperate tactic, slamming her binder shut and snapping, "You think you can just overthrow me? The bylaws give me full authority," but her voice was drowned out by the crowd chanting, "Vote! Vote! Vote!" Within minutes, the board members, clearly terrified of the backlash, called for an emergency vote of no confidence. Neighbors lined up, one by one, casting their ballots. The result wasn't even close. Karen was ousted, stripped of her position in the very room where she once ruled unchallenged. When the final vote was announced, the clubhouse shook with cheers. People hugged each other, clapped, even cried with relief. It wasn't just about me or my car anymore. It was about finally breaking free from years of intimidation. Karen stormed out of the room, her binder clutched like a lifeline, her face red with rage and humiliation. She muttered something about lawsuits as she shoved past people, but nobody listened. She was finished. Later that week, Sheriff Daniels returned to our street to update us. He confirmed that the fake cop had confessed under questioning, admitting Karen had indeed hired him to intimidate rule breakers. That sealed the case. Daniels promised charges would be filed not just against the fraud but potentially against Karen as well for conspiracy and harassment. The neighbors practically threw a block party that night, celebrating their newfound freedom. Kids played outside without fear of being scolded for violating noise ordinances, people parked where they wanted, and laughter filled the air where tension once lived. As for my wife and me, we stood by our repaired car, watching it all unfold. She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Looks like you started a revolution." I smiled, wrapping my arm around her. Sometimes it only takes one smashed car to expose the truth. From that day on, the neighborhood was different. People weren't afraid anymore. Karen had been dethroned, her fake cop in jail, and her iron grip broken. The HOA still technically existed, but now it served the community instead of ruling it. And whenever someone brought up the story of the fake cop who smashed my car, they didn't tell it as a story of fear. They told it as the day the neighborhood took its power back. And me? I just smiled every time and thought, he really didn't expect what happened next.